heart monitor on there. It'll tie in with the rest of the slides. So today I will be discussing how to prevent infidelity. I have discovered that there is really only one primary way to prevent infidelity. And there will be some overlap with the other presentations that have gone forward. We didn't talk amongst ourselves in terms of what the presentations would entail, but I think the Lord is speaking to us and allowing things to overlap and to really be brought out in different ways. So for now, let's take a look at the heart. Understanding the heart is vital to our understanding of how to prevent infidelity in marriage. And so here are some definitions for the word heart. Dictionary.com defines the heart as the center of the total personality, especially with reference to intuition, feeling, or emotion. It also defines it as the innermost or central part of anything. Your heart is the innermost part of you, the center of your being. It contains your innermost desires that drive your life. Your heart is the part of you that can be thought of as the real you. I have a picture that kind of shows what I'm trying to kind of convey in this slide. Your heart really is like a container that contains pretty much everything that's essential to your personality. So you have, kindness, you have gentleness, you have compassion, all these different emotions and things that are contained within your heart that kind of make up who you are. So your intuitions, your feelings, your emotions, your desires, etc., they're all contained within your heart. So what does this really have to do with infidelity? Well, the heart of a person plays the most vital role when someone commits the act of infidelity. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." And it kind of illustrated a little bit better. The New Living Translation says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it." And so this includes adultery. This includes infidelity. So from this scripture, it is pretty clear that everything that a person does flows directly from the heart. Let's take a little bit of a deeper look at this, actually. So as mentioned prior, Proverbs 4:23 says that all of our issues, everything that we do, it stems from our heart. But Matthew 15:19 actually gets a little bit more specific in terms of infidelity. So Matthew 15:19 says, "Out of the heart proceeds evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies." So when we combine Proverbs 4:23 and Matthew 15:19, we can see that the heart really is the most vital component when, in terms of somebody committing any act of sin or any act outside of what we believe is right. This is a powerful idea, but nonetheless, this is not quite the full story. Adultery actually goes deeper than this, and it's important to understand this when considering how to prevent it from happening. So again, we're dealing with how to prevent infidelity and adultery from taking place. So, adultery is not just committing the physical act. It's not just like Minister Banks said, when you're in bed with somebody, that's pretty much the end of infidelity. That's not when it started. Matthew 5:27 and 28 says, "You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery." That's talking about the physical adultery. That's talking about you sleeping with somebody else. "But I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent," and I chose that version because of that wording. Anybody who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. The point here is adultery is actually committed in the heart. It's not just committed in the physical. And when you look at that terminology, lustful intent, that's something that we have to understand as well. Lustful intent really has to deal with when you have lust for something. That's really a desire that's out of control. That's a desire that's pretty much gotten out of hand. And when we talk about lustful intent, you're talking about something that you're intending on doing. So you have this desire for this person that's outside of your marriage. You have this desire for somebody that you're not married to, and you're intending, you're conceiving, you're meditating upon being with this other person. That's really what adultery is, and that's really when it is committed. So I said that to say, this leads us to the one true way to prevent infidelity. The one true way to prevent infidelity is don't let it take root in your heart. Once infidelity has taken root in your heart, it has already begun to work in your life. This process can see more clearly in James 1:13 through 15. And actually, I'm not going to read that whole scripture, but basically it's talking about when a person is tempted to pretty much commit any sin, but when you're tempted, you're drawn away from with your own lust. It's not anything that God does. God cannot tempt anybody. The temptation really is something that's inside of you that's being drawn out. So once lust is conceived in your heart for a person who is not your spouse, it is nearly impossible for infidelity not to take place physically. But thank God that He has given us ways to prevent this from happening. So, prevention. How do we keep infidelity and adultery from taking root in our hearts? The best way to keep infidelity from taking root in your heart is to develop a strong, sincere relationship with the Lord. Psalm 16:11 says, "You make known to me the path of life. In your presence is the fullness of joy. And at your right hand are pleasures forevermore." When you stay in the presence of God, He fills you with His nature. The more you stay in His presence, the more you stay in God's presence, the more like Him you will become. Sin cannot live in the presence of God. And as you spend time in the presence, your heart will become cleansed and purified from those sinful desires. I like to think of it as God will fill you with Himself, and there will be no place for anything else in you. There will be no place for adultery. There will be no place for infidelity. The next way that you can prevent it is to maintain a strong relationship with your spouse. And that's really not apart from God. That's you, God, and your spouse, all intertwined. As you can see, the threefold cord in the picture. So Ecclesiastes 4:12 in the New Living Translation states, and I really like how this states it. A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. Three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. So, in continuing and maintaining a strong relationship with your spouse, you must maintain open and honest communication at all times. No secrets. Experts suggest that pretty much all affairs are centered around secrets. Keeping this open and honest communication with your spouse will allow you to guard your hearts against the enemy. You also must make your spouse a priority. No one comes before God, but after God, your spouse is the number one priority. Genesis 2:24, again, overlapping with some of the scriptures already mentioned. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. Your relationship with your spouse is more important than any other relationship that you have with friends or family. Why do I say this? Well, it's kind of already contained in that scripture, and I think we've discussed it a lot here. This is because your spouse is the only person on earth that you have a covenant with that is recognized by God. Your covenant with your spouse is the most important agreement that you have on earth, and the one that traditionally should only be broken by death. No other relationship carries this amount of weight in the eyes of God. And when you think about becoming one with somebody, nothing else should really come before that relationship. When you're one with somebody, everything that you do affects that other person. It's not the same with any other relationship. Also in terms of prevention, this is kind of more so, I guess, dealing with the physical aspect of things. As a practical matter, if you want to prevent infidelity, you must also set boundaries, which we talked about. You cannot commit infidelity if you are not in a position to commit it. An example of a boundary that you can create is that you won't find yourself alone in an intimate setting with someone of the opposite sex, like Mr. Glenn said. This is not to suggest that every time you're alone with somebody that you are going to automatically commit the act of infidelity, but if you are never in that setting, it's pretty much impossible for infidelity to take place. Another example, and again we hit on this, an example of a boundary is allowing your spouse full access to social media accounts and electronic devices, including cell phones. That's the boundary of no secrecy. Tablets, computers, etc. It's all pretty much just fine. This is a great way to make sure that there are no secrets that are in your marriage. As a reminder, physical boundaries are only secondary to the boundaries that we set by guarding our hearts. The only one true way to prevent infidelity is by guarding your heart, preventing the infidelity from taking root in the first place. We guard our hearts by watching what we see, watching what we hear, and by allowing God's presence to cleanse us from the inside out. We do everything in our power to make sure that the wrong thoughts, the wrong motives, desires, and everything like that does not creep into our hearts and minds. And I'm reminded of that scripture in 2 Corinthians where it talks about casting down imaginations. Every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. You have to actively take charge and try to make sure that nothing from the outside world is entering into your heart that could ultimately lead to infidelity and some of the things that were pointed out earlier. So I kind of want to end this off with a question that one might be asking themselves. What if I feel like I have already started to desire someone besides my spouse? What should I do in that particular situation? If I feel like adultery or infidelity or whatever the case may be is already trying to take root in my heart, what if I'm starting to feel these desires for somebody else that's not my spouse? What if, I'm at work and, this person is, really, talking to me in a way that, I'm wanting my spouse to talk to me? What if I'm, in this place where I'm like, okay, if something doesn't happen, I might find myself in a bad situation. So in the event that you feel that infidelity has already taken some root in your heart, in order to prevent it from going any further, you must seek prayer and counseling, like Sister Banks said. And you must do it immediately. Galatians 6:1 says, brothers, if anyone is caught in a transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in the spirit of gentleness. James 5:16 says, therefore confess your sins one to another and pray for each other so that you might be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and is effective. Seeking intervention as soon as possible is the best option to prevent it from going any further, and the only way to truly allow God to restore you and to heal your heart. And I have seen, cases, different couples, people that have sought counseling and that have gotten help, and God has literally turned their marriage around in this. And God has truly worked miracles for people. So this works. I'm not just saying it. This is something that is actually will actually help you. And I know my brothers talk about sometimes it's hard for people to find that resource, but when you have it available, definitely take advantage of it. So that's all I have.